All right. So when we talk about our skeletal system and our muscular system, um, their main purpose is to help us move and support our body and protect certain organs. Um, we call that movement, a word for it is locomotion. It's kind of a weird word, but locomotion means movement. Different organisms have different ways of moving. Um, Obviously, some animals are invertebrates. They have no bones, but they could still move. They have muscles attached in different ways. So our system, our skeletal system, works by us having muscles that are attached to our bones. We call that our skeleton or endoskeleton. They kind of work together. To allow our body to move, we have muscles and bones and tendons and ligaments. It's a pretty complex system of interconnected tissues that allow us to do that. In adult human body, there's 206 bones. So if you were to count them all, like that little mini skeleton we have over there, if it were accurate, it would have 206 different bones. Lots of them are in the vertebrae, right? Those little bones that are stacked one on top of the other. 33 of them are vertebrae. We have a lot of them in our feet and our hands as well. 26 in each foot, 27 in each hand. Because in our hands and feet, there's lots of small bones in our wrists and our ankles. We have 12 pairs of ribs on each side. And then we have, the longer bones that make up our arms and our legs and our cranium and so forth. Our bones and our skeleton has a couple purposes, right? First of all, it gives us our shape of our body. Your height, the shape of your body is determined in large part by your skeleton. The longer your bones are, the taller you're going to be. But they also have an important job to do in terms of protecting some vital organs. Like, what do you think? What's the most important organ of your body, would you say? Your heart's really important. Is it protected by any bone?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, your rib cage and your sternum, right? It's strong bones are protecting your heart and your lungs from damage. What's another important organ that's protected? Besides your heart, somewhere else, different system. What about your brain? Your brain is super important, right?
Skull.
It's protected by your cranium, your skull, right? It's thick bone protects us so that we're less likely to damage our brain. Your spinal cord, right? Protected by those vertebrae. So our bones, part of their job is to help protect those organs. They also are where our muscles attach. Our muscles are attached to our bones, and our muscles pull on our bones, and that allows us to move. Our bones also store lots of minerals. We have calcium and phosphorus in our bones. And if we need calcium or phosphorus, our body can take it out of our bones. And so that's why sometimes if a person does not have enough calcium, then their bone could start to lose it and becomes less dense, and they can have something called osteoporosis. Our bones are alive. It's living material. So like we kind of think like bones are just, like our hair and our nails, they're just like not alive. They're just, produced and then they're stuck like that. They're actually living tissue. They're made of cells. Our bones are made of cells. They have blood vessels going through our bones. They have nerves going through them. So they're pretty complex. And then there's some non-living material also in our bones, the like bony part. And that's made of calcium and phosphate and carbonate. When we look at our bones, here's a picture of one of our long bones. And inside the bone, it's not just like a solid chunk of material. It's made of different parts. And in the middle is something that's called the bone marrow. Have you ever heard of that? Bone marrow? Bone marrow is a soft tissue inside our long bones and at the end sometimes. And its job is really important. This is where our blood cells are produced. Red blood cells and white blood cells and platelets. They're actually made inside of our bones. and then they go into our circulatory system. That's why, if you've ever heard of somebody maybe that has a type of like leukemia or another form of cancer, might need a bone marrow transplant. Something's going on with their bone marrow. It's not producing enough blood cells. And so they can take bone marrow from one person and they can transplant it into another person to try to improve on it and treat their illness. There's different types of marrow, yellow marrow, red marrow, but we don't have to worry about the details of that. And then on the outside of our bone is sort of a membrane that sort of surrounds them. There's lots of blood vessels in that membrane, lots of nerves as well. This is where new bone material is made that increases sort of the thickness of the bones as we grow. Or has anyone ever broken a bone? I've never broken a bone. So if you break a bone, right, it eventually heals, right? You probably have a cast or something.
I broke my wrist.
Your wrist. And so did you have a cast? Yeah, and when you put a cast on, what it does, it basically holds everything still so that this new bone material can start to be produced. And a break in your bone heals very well, right? It's just as strong after as it is before. It's like if you break a bone, it's not really weaker afterwards. Whereas if you have like a really bad ankle sprain or something like that,
I sprained my ankle.
Yeah, it can be that it doesn't really heal all the way fully, and you have some damage that is long lasting. The bone cells itself, they look, I'll show you a picture here in a minute. They kind of look like a whole bunch of these small circular areas, and then surrounding them are the bone material. And so here we see in a diagram, what a bone might look like. So you have the bony material and that layer around it where the new bone material comes from, the periosteum. You have the marrow that's inside the long parts, and then the red marrow in the ends of the bone. And around the ends of the bone is also cartilage. Cartilage is like slippery material that helps cushion where bones rub against each other, so they just glide over each other and they're not like smashing into each other. While you're growing, you have these areas in your bones called growth plates. You can see them here. And these growth plates are the areas where your bones are elongating over time. And so as you grow taller throughout your lifetime, you grow taller by adding bone at these special areas called growth plates. Now, eventually they close up. They become bone like the rest of us. And at that time, basically, you're done growing. So have you ever had an x-ray? Like sometimes the doctor can tell you, oh, you're still growing, or no, you're your final height probably, because they look at these growth plates and see if they've closed up or not, or if they're still sort of open. So here you have two bones, the ulnar and radius, and this is the wrist, and you can see that this is the growth plate here between those where the bone is growing. Here's one of those individual bone cells. If you look at a slide of a cross section of bone, this is what it looks like. Okay, and so what you have is an area made of these different bone cells all around the outside. And in the center part of that, there's a little sort of tube where veins, arteries, nerves can go through these little tubes that are throughout your bone. And the new bone material is produced by these cells called the osteoblasts around the outside. Here's our skeleton. Here's the bones that we have. We're not going to memorize the bones or anything, but this is showing you the names for the bones. Okay? And so some of the ones you're probably familiar with. This bone up here, your upper arm, that's called your humerus. You have one bone up here, right? And it's kind of you can feel it a little bit. But in your forearm here, that's made of two different bones. Okay? They're called the ulna and the radius. And if you hold on to your arm and rotate your wrist, you can feel them, right? They kind of move around. Yeah, you could feel those bones sort of rotate as you rotate your wrist. Same thing in our legs. We have one really long, the longest bone, the femur, in your upper leg. And then in our shin area, we have two bones. Right? That's the tibia and the fibula. They make up the lower leg. There's tons of bones. Look at all these bones just in our feet. There's, a ton of little small different bones that make up our feet, also that make up our hands. We have a bunch of tiny little bones called the carpals in your wrists. Our cranium is actually not one bone. It's made of a bunch of bones that kind of grow together and close up. And if you ever have been around like a little baby, at first they have a little spot in their skull that's soft. It's not filled in with bone yet. And over time, that's because their brain is still growing a lot. So they need some space for that, and then eventually that closes up. So, thank you.
Interrupting.
What's that?
I said I'm interrupting.
No problem. Thank you.
Now I gotta do that.
Thank you.
There you go, man.
Appreciate it.
That's awesome.
Yeah,
You worked hard for that. You deserve it.
Thank you.
Nice. That's
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, it's surreal almost.
I know.
But we did it.
Over.